That's really.
You're up and you're on.
Okay. All righty, everybody, it is 6 o'clock. Call the meeting to order. Kathy, roll call, please.
Mayor Chapman?
Here.
Councilmember Bean is excused. Councilmember Furby? Here. Councilmember Halverson?
Here.
Councilmember Scanlon?
Here.
Okay, we have 4 people and a quorum is present. Moving on to approval of the agenda.
Your Honor, I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Support.
We have a motion and support. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The agenda is adopted. We are now moving on to public comment. It is a limit of 4 minutes per person. If you would like to speak, you go up to the podium. Please state your name and address. And if you'd like to wait, we do that on this, right? On the specials, they can also move to comment on the agenda later. Yeah, if you'd like. Yeah, the last couple of these meetings, we've allowed people to talk later if at the time of the item. You can do that too. Other than that, please refrain from any bad language, and we can entertain that now. So I saw one hand up, 2 hands up. Ray, we'll start with your lovely wife, Ann.
Well, thank you for that. I'm Ann Olds, 1165 9th Street. Here to talk about the Wabash Street Park. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to come down and give our thoughts on this. To get new playground equipment at the park would be fabulous.
And can I ask you to hold a second?
Oh, yeah. The items of business, well, public comment though, is it not?
No, it's only, you're only allowed to public comment on the items in the special, right?
No,
No?
no.
Okay.
No.
I thought, all right, I'm mistaken.
That's just agenda comment. Go ahead, Ann,
Okay.
sorry.
Sorry, Ann.
Back to-
That's all right.
Make sure.
To get new playground equipment there would be wonderful, but my personal main concern is the basketball court that is there. It is unusable, and the basketball backboards are rotting away. It would be lovely to have that resurfaced and have new basketball backboards and hoops put up. My husband and I took a walk around the neighborhood the other day, and we counted 5 basketball hoops at private citizens' homes, and they're all out on the street. I mean, the hoop hangs over the street. So the kids are out on the street playing, which is great to see, but I have a real concern for their safety. So even if the playground equipment doesn't get purchased, I would respectfully ask that you look into resurfacing that basketball court and bringing that up to date. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Okay, Ray, you are next.
Raymond Olds, 1165 9th Street. I'm here to talk about the Bruce Asgard Park also. Just as my wife said, my main concern is the basketball court. But I did find some things on the website, the city website, about the Bruce Asgard Park, and it says, as of 2016, the site includes a buckabout, which there is one there. A merry-go-round, there is one there. A basketball court, well, there's one there, but I would call that very unsafe. Picnic tables, there are no picnic tables. A volleyball court, no volleyball court. A slide, a 3-belt swing, and those are all there. And I must say, I think there should be some trash cans added to that too. But from 2016, we seem to have lost a volleyball court. Our basketball court is bad and the picnic tables are gone. We're losing ground. So I think it is time for an update. And on the website here from the Parks and Recreation Board, it does say The park would benefit from a sign at the entrance, updated equipment, accessible parking, and a pathway, and perhaps an all-season skating rink and multi-use field or updated basketball court. It seems like basketball court is one of their goals also. It just seems like now would be the time to do that basketball court. I'm sure the Parks and Recreation Committee would be happy to see that done. And if we can get newer playground equipment in there, that would be just a big added plus. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Okay, is there anybody else that would like to speak during public comment or reserve time to speak? Okay, is there anybody on Zoom? Looks like just two. If you would like to speak during public comment, you can use the raise your hand feature. I'll give you a second. Okay, last call in the room or on Zoom for public comment. Hearing none, we will now move on to our two items of business. First item of business is council manager governance presentation by the ICMA and MME. Is that supposed to be MML? No, MME, okay.
Mission Municipal Executives.
Oh, okay, all right.
We have
Welcome,
Ray Anderson will be doing a presentation, and we also have Scott here to
McInnes, yep.
McInnes here to answer questions as well.
Okay, all righty. Thank you both.
Jason, you want to pull slides up?
What was Scott's last name?
McInnes? Okay, Ray, you're up.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I want to start by thanking you for the opportunity to come and speak with you tonight. I also want to start by thanking each and every one of you for your public service as council members, especially of your city. I think the civil service, our civic service is it's a wonderful thing. And as myself, my name is Ray Anderson. I'm retired city manager from the city of Norway. I was in Norway for 23 years, and I spent 10 years prior to that out in the private sector, but I am born and raised from Norway, so I am a Yooper. And after my time in Norway, I was asked by the International City Managers Association, ICMA, and the Michigan Municipal Executives, MME, to represent the UP region as a senior advisor. And so that's my role here tonight, is to come and present for you this council manager governance presentation.
And thank you for your service too.
You're welcome. Okay, so next slide. So what we're going to talk about tonight, I'm going to go through, and I'm going to start by just saying that I'm very informal when I give my presentations. Some of this information, I'm sure, is going to be it's like a no kidding type of thing, but you get to a slide, you get to a topic, you want to ask a question, you ask right then and there. I don't really like to just go through it and then wait till the end. I'd like to address it right at the time. So what we're going to talk about is basically we'll start with the legal basis of the council management government, the principles of public administration, principles of public service ethics, council member roles, the administrator duties, productive council administrator relations, and the council member effectiveness. Next slide, please. So when we start by the legal basis of your council management government or manager government, it really goes back to the turn of the 20th century, where there was a hurricane in Texas, and Galveston Island was devastated. And actually, that's where the principles of a city administrator came about, because they had trouble organizing the relief efforts. And so they realized at that time that it would be good to have a professional, come up with a professional or a profession for our business. And so it's grown from there. The ICMA, again, wants someone like myself to come out and help councils to understand that relationship with that manager and the council. So in the state of Michigan, the legal basis for our manager form of government comes through the Michigan Constitution, the Homeroom City Act, created your city, and then, of course, your charter and your code of ordinances. So that all develops the legal basis by which you have your council manager government. Next slide, please. So under the principles of public administration, next slide. So I'm going to go through, there's some basic principles for public administration. We start with neutral competence, and the key word is neutral. We all expect competence, but our job is neutral. Next slide. We always look for efficiency and effectiveness. Next slide. Responsiveness, something very important. Next slide. And accountability. Back to responsiveness. When I moved out of the private sector and came into government, I sort of had a private sector idea of coming in with handling budgets and handling my job. And one of the things I recognized right on is it's different. I know that in the private sector, they get frustrated by the movement of government sometimes, but we are a service business as much as we are dealing with the money and the dollars and cents. And so we have to incorporate that service of our constituents. And so, and we're also democracy, and democracy is very slow. So these are the principles, though, that we go by through our public administration. Next slide. So under the public administration, of course, we have public service ethics. Public office is a public trust to be used solely to advance the public interest. Next slide. Decisions should be made on the merits based upon objective judgments. Of course, we all sit in discussion looking at our budget, looking at our plans, and we need to make decisions based on what's good for the entire public and not just a specific constituency. Next slide. Public officials must be accountable for their actions. That's key. Otherwise, we don't have trust. We have nothing. Transparency and trust. Those are key elements. And then next slide. Honor and respect democratic principles by adhering to the letter and spirit of the law. We aren't afforded the ability sometimes to always interject our specific opinions. We go by the principles of adhering to the spirit of the law, and we keep things as consistent as possible for everyone. Next slide. Okay, so we also avoid conduct creating an appearance of impropriety. Again, that goes back to transparency, trust. We have to make sure we're above board. We don't want to leave any of that appearance of impropriety. So, next slide. Okay, so the mission of the city, this is just a general mission. The powers of the city shall include, but are not limited to, the following: prevention of injury or nuisance to the city's inhabitants or visitors from anything which is dangerous, offensive, and unhealthy. Pretty basic stuff, but it's really the essence of what we do. We protect the environment and our constituents as best we can. So, next slide. Okay, so we'll start with the council member roles. Again, as I said early on, a lot of this stuff you're gonna look at and go, yeah, I get it. It's pretty basic, but it's good to go through. So as a council member, you're the thought leaders, you're the policy makers, You're the fiduciaries, the overseers, and the advisors. So you're the high level. You're as an administrator, I don't come up with, Craig doesn't come up with these policies on our own. I mean, we need to know from the community, and as a council member, you reflect from the community of what these policies are, the policy makers, you're the policy makers. Even in the budget, we put the numbers together, but we fashion the budget based on the policy, based on what the thought is of our thought leaders, our council members. So, and then you oversee, and this is where the accountability comes in, you oversee what the manager and the staff of what we're doing to implement your policy. That's the next slide. So as policymakers, we put together strategic plans. We have ordinances, rules and regulations, budgets, the resolutions and contracts. These are all, again, I mean, we do this on a regular basis. We probably don't even think about it, but that all comes into what makes our policy. And then it gives the direction of where the staff can go with that. Next slide. So for the city administrative duties, we do policy implementation, ordinance enforcement, the budgeting, the purchasing, appointing and supervising staff, and advising the council. So we follow right along with the previous slide. Our job is to implement the policies, the budgets, to make sure that that we follow through and provide you, not only provide you with the feedback, but we're accountable for putting those together and putting those forward. Next slide. So principles of a productive council-manager relation and relationship. Next slide, please. So the council and administrator are on the same team. So that's critical. That's right off the top. We're on the same team. We have the same objective. Doesn't mean we have the same ideas all the time, but we have the same objective. Next slide. So the council speaks with one voice. This is probably, could be one of the more misunderstood sections of the slide. Each one of you has a voice, and each one of you should voice your voice. But at the end of the day, in order for the manager and staff to effectively and efficiently perform, it needs to have one message. Okay, so your voice, your multiple voices, and the public's multiple voices need to come down like a funnel, come down to one voice that directs the manager, who then directs the staff. And if we don't have, it's like listening to a bad tape or album. You know, if you hear a lot of music going on that doesn't match, it's confusing. So we have to try to get that one voice, one message atmosphere. That's to go back to the effectiveness and efficiency component. Next slide. So a council directs staff through the administrator. Again, that goes back to the one voice. If staff is hearing from multiple people, they get confused. Number one, they get confused because they don't know which message to take. Number two, there's an actual potential problem with from a human resource standpoint, because they could feel threatened. So I used to use an example with my council. It's not that we're saying you can't talk to staff. By all means, that's not, especially in a small town. I mean, we're the UP, we're small towns. Everybody knows everybody. You see them at church, you see it in a grocery store, wherever. It's going to happen. So the example I gave is, if you go up to a staff member and you say, There's a pothole on 7th Avenue. There's nothing wrong with that. If you go up to the staff member and say, you need to get that pothole on 7th Avenue, that's the gray area you just crossed. Because now you're giving a directive, you're not just giving them information. Giving information is great. I actually encourage that in my staff. But I also encourage them to let me know. I encourage them to let everybody know, and take care of it. If you're giving that information, let everybody know that you got that information, so then we can take care of it. Next slide. Administrator informs all council members equally. I'm gonna flip that script. If I'm telling one council member something, then I tell another council member something, and another council member something, it can sometimes get crossed. And the most important thing is that everybody gets the same information. And so if you come into my office and say, I need to have information on A, B, and C, one of the first things I'd say is, okay, that's great. I'll get you that information. It's going to go to all the council members. I want all the council members to know, and the council members should all want to know the information that's being disseminated amongst the group. And you should want that to go out to all the council members. So we want to keep everybody informed. We want to keep all the information flowing at the same. And I think that's really important. So next slide. And then everyone communicates civilly. We're all trying to do the same thing. We're all trying to protect the public, help the public, respond to the public. We might have different ideas of how we do it, but if we can't act civilly amongst each other, then it becomes a circus, and we don't want a circus. And nobody wants a circus. We want good, effective, efficient government. I think our residents want good, effective, efficient government. I've been around long enough to see TV6 get a hold of some communities where it became, it was embarrassing. And I know residents from the community were embarrassed. We were embarrassed for them, and it just is not a good look. So I think that's critical. Now, I've been rambling. I mean, you guys have any questions as I'm going through this? No? Okay, next slide. So council member effectiveness. Next slide. So again, we'll go back to focusing on the big picture. Part of our, for staff is to fish out the smaller items. We're looking for that big picture focus, and that'll help us. It'll be more productive for the council, and we'll handle the details and then get them back to you. Next slide. Stays informed. Council members, it's a two-way street. There's a lot of different ways different council members like to be informed. Some like it all in paper, some like it all electronic. They like informal, maybe more one-on-one discussions. It's all different, but it's a two-way street. Some of the most frustrating times that I've had personally is when I've had council members that only time I saw them was on meeting night, and I'd ask them, everything okay? I'd call them sometimes and say, is there anything that you want to talk about? Nope, everything's fine, everything's fine. And it was just a kind of a lack of communication sometimes that I wanted to find out how they were doing. So I always said, don't feel like you're bothering, interrupting, like the manager's too busy. We're not too busy for council members, all right? If you have something, come and talk, pick up the phone, send a text, however you want to stay informed. But next slide. Shares knowledge and ideas and opinions. Over 23 years, again, I've had a few times when it was really hard to get information out. I had this on boards and committees where I'd come into like a planning commission, and it's like, we'd go through the agenda, we'd go through items, and it's like, nobody would say anything. You're like trying to draw out people's ideas and opinions. That's a good thing to have ideas and knowledge and ideas and opinions. So feel free to express those. We go back to the other principles though, so that we're all working together. But it's good to express those opinions. Next slide. Works towards consensus. Again, a big key. We're all working towards the same goal. Next slide. And then ethical. We're transparent, honest, we put everything on the table. That's important. That's important for everybody to trust us. Because once you lose it, it's hard to get back. Next slide. If there's any questions, I kind of rambled through it, but does nobody have?
I have a lot of questions. Some are related to this, some are not necessarily related to this. Because, we haven't had any other trainings for council. I've been on here for nearly 5 years now, if not already 5. And I think when it comes down to my question on ethical, is it our duty to be trying to do everything we can as a member of the city council to meet with residents and hear what they have to say and so forth? And because one of the things I started was hosting a coffee hour / a listening session, and the public drives those conversations.
Yeah, my opinion, for the manager's sake, you are representing your constituents, the residents. Doesn't mean that we don't also do the same thing.
Right, yes, I understand that.
I would much rather have an army out looking, getting feedback than just trying to rely on one person, myself or one other person. So the more ears we have out in the community, the better. The key is to take that information back and to put it into that common goal, working together. And then also with the residents, that they also know that sometimes their ask is not possible. I would say that some of the hardships I've had over the years was when I told somebody no. And one of the things I didn't like to do was if somebody came up to me and said, hey, why don't we do this, this, and this, or can we do this, this, and this? And I said, we can't, right there. If I know that answer, I'm gonna tell you right there.
Yes.
I've seen it happen numerous times where you say, I'll get back to you on that. Well, you just left them with the idea that it's a possibility.
Yep.
When you probably know it's not. So it's important to address it right away. But if you do say it, I'll get back to you, get back to them.
Yes.
That's important.
And to piggyback off of that, I firmly believe in honesty and transparency, and that transparent government is the absolute best thing, because it leaves people asking fewer questions too. So, and I've tried to bring those types of things back too, but I think that we all have to try and figure out how to do it on our own way, but I think we also have to trust each other that what we're bringing back is factual and real. So I guess that's kind of where I'm going from with that, but maybe a legal question, because I haven't had any training on the Open Meetings Act really either. At say a listening session, I usually co-host them with Councilmember Halverson, Is it a good idea to have or allow a third council member to be at that meeting? It's not, it's not necessarily a city sanctioned. I host those out on my own. And is that legal or is that a non-legal thing to do?
Well, I'm not an attorney, so that's the first thing I'll say. You have 5 council members?
Yes.
Okay, so 3 would be a quorum. You're operating on a city function, and it would be, in my view, it would be a violation of the Open Meetings Act.
Thank you.
Have the third one, because
Yep.
it's a city function. Scott McGinnis is from the MML.
Yep.
Yeah, we've done a lot of information and stuff on the league site, and do you have the handbooks from the league?
Just
Those talk-
recently got them.
Okay,
yes.
yeah, those talk a lot about the Open Meetings Act too, but the thing you gotta be careful with in the Open Meetings Act is if 2 people from the council are sitting there and talking about something, then all of a sudden somebody calls somebody on the phone or emails them something with that subject, now you're in violation of the Open
Yep.
Meetings Act again. So you gotta be really careful on discussing any city business outside here, really. I think that's something we kind of just tell everybody, that whether it's a committee meeting or whatever, those should be open to the public. You need to allow the public to address committee or the board at each meeting. But be real careful with texts and emails and stuff like this. In fact, our recommendation is that you don't do any city business over text and even emails. You might have emails through, the information that goes back and forth, but be real careful in saying, here's how I'm gonna vote on this, or here's my thought on that, so.
Right.
And I've been through one open meetings issue already with the city of Houghton, and we won it, but it cost us $40,000 in 6 months of bad PR in the paper.
Right.
So those are things that you gotta be really careful on. And you could have someone come in and grab your phones and your computer like the state police and say, we're gonna look at all this stuff. So just be really careful there. I think that is one of the big things with insurance liability and stuff like that too, is violations of the Open Meetings Act and stuff. So your insurance companies really want to make sure that you're following the rules.
And I've got more questions on the same topic. Is it acceptable for more than one council member to attend a committee meeting if they're both, say, 2 are in the audience and one is on the committee itself, and it's a city committee?
Yeah, I would say yes. It's just like somebody else from the public
you.
joining that meeting.
Committees have to fall under the same rules, so planning commissions, DDAs, you don't want to have them doing business outside of the normal area.
So you said it is permissible for council members to attend in the audience.
In the audience.
Are we allowed to also speak under public comment about what other folks have talked to us about?
I would
Residents.
say yes, but I double check with your attorney
Double check
again.
with your attorney.
You get a lot of gray areas in your.
And again, there's just, being accused of something and then trying to get the correct answer. I want to make sure.
Right.
Other than that, is it okay, even on a social occasion, to meet with more than 2 council members?
Yeah, as long as you're not talking city business.
Yeah, don't talk city business.
Yeah.
That happens, especially in a small community.
Yeah, and
There's
that's,
no way you're not gonna have that happen.
I want to make sure that I don't do anything that violates anything. That's always, been a question for me. And I have a question on your city charter. Are they more or less open for interpretation with certain words in there, or are they pretty much set in stone?
Well, your charter is the legal basis for your community, and I would take it, I wouldn't treat it like it's a gray area.
Thank you.
I think that the language is the language. And so there's a number of ways of dealing with if you have outdated language. You can do a complete charter revision, which is extensive. But again, get with your attorney and see what you can and can't work with. I worked out, the city of Norway's charter is from 1949. And the purchasing component of the charter was very restrictive.
Yes, I do agree with that.
So what we did was, council agreed with the auditor and the attorney, and we had a policy that we developed to address that issue, rather than a full charter revision.
And that to me is acceptable, and we've done the same thing
Yeah.
too, because ours kind of was a little archaic on that as well.
Yeah, and that's where you run into trouble, is if you have language in a charter that is very specific, especially dollar figures, then it gets outdated.
Okay, Councilmember Halverson said she had a question or two.
Yeah, I have a question about, all right, what about community websites, okay? I'm a council member and I have my own website.
Or
Okay.
Facebook page.
Or
is that-
Facebook,
yep.
you get the point, and everything. And so how is it dicey? Are we allowed to talk about public issues and take public opinions and votes when we're the sole moderator of those? I mean, do you know what I mean? Say I have a website and there is a certain issue going on in the city that I'm promoting for me personally, or things that I want for the city, okay? So I open that up to public comment, but I am the moderator of that, so I'm moderating out things I don't like. Are we getting into a dicey area there and having surveys where you're moderating, you're the sole moderator of that? It's not a city website,
Sure.
but it's my personal website, okay, where I'm asking the opinions, I'm doing surveys, but I am also moderating
But it's
that.
also not in your name, it's also under the guise of a community
It's
page.
not, I have it in basically an anonymous name, okay? I have, I don't know, I Love Ishpeming website, okay? So I'm not clearly identified as a council member and everything, but I am, and I'm doing that kind of and have the ability to block people I don't want.
And
on
should
my
the city's website send you to something like
Well,
that?
Do you have a policy on anything like that? I mean, you're really into new ground when it comes to web page. I know what websites have been around a while, and Facebook's been around a while now, and
Right.
who knows what else is out there. I'm too old to know all the stuff that's out there. But we haven't always caught up with our policies.
Doesn't this kind of come under the ethical portion of your conversation?
Sure. So, see, as a city manager, we are governed by a code of ethics that we have that is apolitical. Okay? So for us, that would be unheard of. We couldn't do that. But as a council member, you are politics. So I think that comes down to, and this is just me speaking here, I don't think there's anything illegal or totally unethical about that unless you have policies that you put in place that, that you're infringing upon, because that's part of
So speaking out at
politics.
a public hearing, if you're a council member and a resident, is dicey, but speaking out as a council member doing council business and talking about ordinances and everything isn't dicey?
You mean like at
Am I
a,
understanding you wrong here?
you mean like at a DDA meeting, you come and then you stand up under public comment and speak?
Exactly,
I don't think, well, for one thing, it's an open meeting.
right,
So that's an open meeting, and so you're speaking in the public.
right,
I mean, so it's transparent.
okay.
Correct me if I go off straight here.
So a website is
But I think it's
considered
a-
public then too, so I can start one and start pushing my reelection or my preferences on ordinances, and if you say I don't like it, I can moderate you out.
From what I understand with election law, again, I'm not an attorney, but if you have your own PAC, if you file with the county, if you do all of that.
No, we're not
This doesn't
talking
get
about that.
into
We're
that.
talking about just a personal
Okay,
website. We're not talking PACs or elections. We're
Okay.
just talking, I'm stating my opinion, okay, and trying to sway you over to my opinion on an ordinance or a rule or a whatever,
I
is
think
what
that
I'm
comes,
saying.
I think that comes down to your relationship with the council. More than anything.
Right,
Because, you all have a separate voice, but when we come down to policymaking, we have to funnel that into one voice.
right.
Okay, so it's almost ridiculous to think that we don't all have our own personal opinions. But like Craig and I have a much harder time
Right.
because we can't do that.
Right.
We just can't do that.
Understood.
Right.
Whereas,
I just feel like we're kind of, it's getting to the point where people are twisting themselves into a pretzel to say what's a fine line and what isn't a fine line, and what, if it's good for one, it's good for all, and if it's a good policy, then it's a good policy for everyone, is all I'm saying. And if I have people complaining about my site, then that needs to be addressed, I would assume. Or are we just going to say, okay, we're not going to have that be a problem because no one wants to address it?
if you clearly identify yourself as a council member and you say this is not the city's webpage, that's clear.
That's not what I'm doing.
Which I do, yes.
That's not what I'm doing.
Right, I mean,
On
you
this
can't-
particular website, I'm not identifying myself as myself.
Okay, but when I've seen council members get into some trouble is when they go out and they represent the city on their own. Like, this is the city's position, and that's when
That's the gist of what I'm getting.
right, if you're clear that you're giving your personal opinion, but as a council member, you need
Personal
to.
opinion, you would tell me that probably it's not, I need to stop doing that.
So Ray, let me try to dial this in because we're dancing around a subject. So let's just kind of
Okay.
help you with understanding the subject. The subject
All right.
was about marijuana and whether or not there was an opportunity to look into additional licenses and things within the community. And there's two different things that occurred, which is both conversations have come up. One was that there was a coffee hour held by two council members, published in the media as, hey, they're going to discuss what's being proposed as potential discussion with the planning commission as an ordinance change. And people went to the coffee hours, and then following that went to the planning commission. A couple of council members were present. One is assigned to the planning commission as a council representative to the planning commission. The two that stood up, voiced opinions, and actually had comments from the planning commission. Well, if that's how the council is going to be, maybe we should not take this up. And it ended up with a tie split vote and some consternation about where the topic sits. And another council member who was working on a website that was originally generated as a city program under neighborhood enhancement many years ago had been talked about with issues such as blight and other things that the community had. And one of the council members had taken that over as one of the moderators of the site, had voiced an opinion publicly in an open meeting that maybe there's some opinions out there that are for and or against, and took a straw poll using that social media site. And so the question is, where does the line start?
Except
Well,
that
we
doesn't
need to-
explain
Let
it
me
right either.
finish.
No, we need
Because
to
one of the things that
clarify.
happened out of the planning commission was
straw
the
poll
news
was
turned
done
around.
Where you could only comment for, and then those would be sent to individual
Right.
council members' site. But if there was no place to go and say, I don't like this.
If you were in support of it, You
It
could
moved-
click, every council member would get an email. If
But
you were
if you
opposed
were
to
opposed to
it, that
it,
option wasn't
you
there.
were moderated out.
Yes, and that page was also used to harass another council member, block the
Well,
mayor and other
that's-
council.
And if you went to the
So, yes.
if you went to the planning commission meeting, the news then reported that the city decided following that. So we had two
Yes.
competing different interests about a topic that have led into the potential for.
And yes, that shouldn't have been appropriate either, that council
No,
was mentioned.
I'm just saying what's
Right.
out there. We're not, again, I'm neutral, I'm not, I'm
I know,
neutral.
I know, I'm agreeing with you.
What I'm saying is like, these things are stirring and questioning whether it is or isn't over a line or whether it's gray. Sounds like the recommendation might be around establishing a more clear policy that would address these issues, but in the absence of policy, there may have been a gray line crossed, not crossed. That's what I think the whole conversation is about. I'm trying to understand from your perspective. Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is, it seems to me that if we're required to be neutral when expressing opinions in person, then we should be expected, I would think, to have the same philosophy when we're on a website, okay? Unfortunately, we're in an age right now where we have a lot of laptop warriors. So we have for the public, they get very annoyed when we have these conversations in public, okay? But you go to the website and you're seeing that back and forth on, and things that are really uncomfortable are said online, but you're not afforded the opportunity there to respond, even though it might be, I might directly be saying, hey, that green dress that Diz has on tonight, was, I thought it was really wonderful, but somebody else can't go on there and go, well, I really didn't care for it myself. I would moderate that out.
For me,
I mean,
For me,
it sounds very simple, but.
Councilmember Scanlon has a thing to add to this, but for me,
Yeah,
the
go ahead.
ethical part is when I went on there and posted one thing, that this isn't a scientific poll and it doesn't reflect fairly, I was then banned from that. The city website points to that Facebook page. And,
And then our mayor was blocked.
yeah,
from
but
the
anyway,
site.
for just stating a fact. But anyway, and it wasn't mean at all, but Councilmember Scanlon.
I think, and I'd like Ray and Scott both to weigh in on this, I think the whole thing goes back to the ethical part.
Yep.
The web page, Facebook page lost my attention because of the fact that it only shows support. It doesn't show negative.
It
Not a
used to
big
be
deal,
very
not a big-
neutral.
Not a
It
big
used to
deal.
be very neutral.
Not a big
Continue.
deal, but it lost my support. I'm a 20%er. I'm one of 5 people, so I'm a 20%er. That polling means nothing anymore.
Yep.
When I found out that it was the way it was set up. The thing with the planning commission isn't the fact that the 2 council people that attended had public comment. The fact was that they were 2 council people. Wherever I go at a city function, I'm always a council person.
Yes.
I can't take my council hat off, so I gotta bite my tongue. But I have a position on this marijuana thing, and this is where I state it. I don't go out in the public or to a Kiwanis or an Elks or a whatever meeting and say, this is where I believe ethically we should discuss it as 5 of us. The problem with the planning commission meeting was it skewed the planning commission. And right or wrong, the planning commission said, well, I'm looking at 3 council people.
Have you watched my public?
It was a public hearing. It was not a meeting.
Okay,
It was
it
a
wasn't-
public hearing on the ordinance is what it was. And
And I'm
as-
not laying blame on
I am a
anybody for
resident
anything.
of
I
the
just-
city.
That's the way I
Brent,
believe.
let him speak.
That's plain and simple. And I think that it's an ethical thing. Policy, absolutely. We need to have policy because the whole social media thing is out of control. But
And you have to-
I think that we have to, in our own mind, deal with these things in here. You shouldn't be out politicking, for lack of a better word, in public or at meetings. You know what I mean? I'd just like to hear from either one of or both what you think about the position I'm taking.
So you mentioned neutral, okay? Council members, we all know that you have positions and opinions. So the idea of neutrality doesn't block your opinions. That's not what I was getting at. But when you have a decision, then you need to work together on administering, or we need to administer that decision, and it doesn't do anybody any good, it doesn't do us any good if you're still fighting amongst yourselves, you know, and you have two that, well, say it went 3-2. The two that didn't pass, or that were losing on this issue, are now out in the public saying, I voted against it, but, you know, that's just the way it is. Well, you need to support the decision and go forward. I mean, otherwise we have inefficient, ineffective government.
And it has not come to council yet.
So, your planning commission, I found this over the years. It could be any board, DDA, planning commission, Parks and Rec, you name it. It is really important. You know, you can intimidate them. You're the council. I mean, you are the decision-making body of the city. And so, you know, you don't want to be in a position, you want them to free flow and do their job. I think that's important. So yes, you might have the legal right to stand up, but is it the right thing to do? If it's going to intimidate them, and I hate to use such a strong word, but if it's going to intimidate them and sway them, you know, you want them to do their job.
Right.
And you are absolutely correct. This is the final body that needs to take on that issue and have that public hearing and have those discussions and fetter that out. But, you know, as far as, in my opinion, on the social media side, as long as you're not inaccurately representing the city, then, you know, I just don't see how that's any.
Yeah, I don't think there's any legal thing. I think it's just ethical in a way.
But if you're saying you're the voice of the city and it's just one person, then I think you're
Or
stepping
being
out.
assumed, yes.
I don't know if you have.
I've been covering UP cities now for about 10 years with the league, and I had 40 years with the city. The social media thing has changed the whole dynamics of what's going on here. And I've seen it time and time again where one or two people on a city council go through social media and try to push their own agenda. And what that does is all of a sudden it drives a wedge within the city for a lot of stuff and for a lot of different topics. And it divides the community up and the teamwork falls apart. So I think you just have to be real careful on how you do that. You know, are you working as part of the team, or are you off on your own kind of doing something that, you know, if the council wants to put up a poll, put up a poll, you know, do it as a team.
Unified front.
Yeah, you know, and I've had cases even with the city of Houghton where, you know, I had a group of people, we had a great apartment project that we were gonna do, and it was in our master plan. I mean, we had everything else. We had a group of people that came to the meeting and they opposed the project. And I had 3 council members that voted against it. I only had 6 that night, so it didn't pass. I said, what happened? I said, we've been working on this project for a year and a half. We got a developer and the whole works, and all of a sudden 3 people just said, we listened to the 6 people that were in the audience, and that's how we voted.
Right, you can't.
So
just
I think
listen to
those are
the
kinds of
people
things
there,
that you
no.
just have to be careful that you're not trying to drive a wedge within this teamwork that you have here. And it's happened over and over and over again. And this social media thing is blowing things right up.
And I've managed government pages for a state representative when I worked for her, but I also managed her state representative campaign. There is a time and a place to post certain things. and not to be deceptive on either or. But my biggest, what I at least try to do with my page is I don't, number one, identify that this is a city-operated page. I don't try to identify that it's even a government page. I either have it listed as a public figure or a politician for a specific reason. But I try to just use it for specific, putting up an agenda or putting up something for people or promoting whatever is going on in the community or stuff like that. But I think when you cross there is a line you can cross. I hope I haven't crossed it on myself on that page that references my position. And then there's your personal page. That's something too that you have to kind of figure out with your own amendment rights and so forth. But I think the big portion where I think two of us are trying to get at is it ethical to do certain things, and is it then ethical to basically tear down your own fellow council members publicly too? So that has happened recently in the same scenario. So that's, I think, what we're trying to ask the questions on and rip this Band-Aid off a little bit to get some ethical or legal questions answered.
And I think he answered that.
Yes.
You're going to have to go to neutrality and stay there.
Oh, I think, yeah. Relatively neutrality, yes.
Is that pretty much what you said?
Yeah, it's, if you go to the legal or the ethical, you're trying to come up with, you're trying to go back to standards on that. And if you don't have policy, I mean, I don't think that there's specific ethics that without a policy that you're going to be able to really say it's unethical. I think you just want to, like Scott said, I think you want to do this in a united front. And so you don't have a wedge.
What kind of policies do other cities have that, number one, would not be overreaching to say you can't have your own page to bring forth and promote things in the city that are going on, or to promote your own campaign for election or what have you? I mean, I think that's the biggest part where I don't know if any of us have that answer right now on what crosses what line, but I think we all have the same idea that we would probably like to develop some policies that would curtail this for the future.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I started looking into an area for policy that we didn't have, or updating policies we had, I mean, first thing I would do is start searching around different communities. Quite frankly, I pulled a number of ordinance and zoning language from Ishpeming, to look at and to give to our planning commission. I think you have some wonderful language within your ordinances and your zoning. From a policy standpoint, though, I mean, they're all over the board, especially when it comes to social media.
Right.
Everybody has something,
Yeah.
so you can just cut and paste and figure out what works best for you on how to do that.
And
Takes time.
Does the MML have some examples or resources available for that yet, or no?
There's samples, I think the MML has on their webpage.
We could have, I'm not sure, and I don't know whether communities might be have done for policies for that. Not that I'm aware of, I haven't really looked hard at it, but I could look into it some more for you.
It all
Thank you.
depends on what it is. I mean, I know that they have a library on some of the ordinances, but not so much maybe on the policies. Social media, when we first started really having to deal with, especially Facebook, wasn't so much with webpage, but Facebook.
Yeah.
There was a lot of activity to try and get a social media webpage, especially with comments, dealing with comments. How do you deal with that? It can be tough.
And I guess I have one last question, not on this topic. Should your city charter be digitalized for the residents to see and be able to look at it too?
Are you
Online?
codified?
Pardon me?
Are you codified? Is your ordinance, are your ordinances out online?
Our ordinance are, but our charter is not.
Charter's on the website, isn't it?
No.
We've had it typed, but it has not been approved.
Oh,
Well, when we went through a codification effort in Norway, the charter was part of it. So when you come to you go to the City of Norway webpage, it's actually through a company called Municode. And so, we found a lot of old ordinances that needed to be, gone, but they went through our charter and they put the charter on as well. So you
I
can,
think that would be good.
it's
to have
online, you
somebody
can see it.
professionally do it, yeah.
plus you can search within the search engine.
It's already typed, because I've got half of it digitalized myself.
But we are going to, so. that was-
Eventually, yeah, I
was
think
the
that needs
question.
to.
It can be made public.
I agree,
And-
that's
and-
what I'm saying, is we need to
And we
get this
also
out.
have a social media page.
But we don't allow
or we-
comments on it anymore.
Correct. That's because you took the capacity away for us to do it.
yeah, but it-
But we do have
Shouldn't
a
have had to
policy
pay
on
for-
what we do with city-managed pages,
Yeah, the city has a managed page, yes.
with a policy for how we manage social media on city-managed pages. But you're asking about our non-city managed pages.
Correct, yes.
Do you have a
I
council
guess
member
the-
policy?
The question
I don't
is
believe
when you
so.
go
Nobody ever
to
told
our
me
city
if you did.
managed
We have
page, it
council rules.
refers you
Council
to
rules?
a private page as an informational.
That was originally generated as a city page.
That's where
But
we've
that
had some of
needs
that,
to
is in council
probably come
rules and
down.
talks about the relationship, not only with amongst yourselves, but it talks about the relationship with the manager and staff, that you go through the manager and how all that works.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can share it, we're willing to share it, we'd love to
We
share.
had a council member years ago who's passed away. His name was Lee Gazzetti. Very entertaining councilman. But he was a civics teacher. He was my freshman civics teacher in 1969. And I think we've lost that in our school system
Oh,
because
God, yes.
I know the difference between a city manager's strong government and things because of Mr. Gazzetti.
You're
And
100%
people
right.
nowadays don't always know that, and that goes back to our council rules that we've worked on. By no means have we finished them, but we've got a good start, I guess, and things like that. So people know their roles and their positions. And the thing I went back to a little earlier was the social side of things. If I'm having lunch with another council person, if I think I'm doing something wrong, I probably am,
You're right. Yeah.
and if I'm out with friends from council and staff, and I think I'm doing something wrong, I probably am. And that's probably the best guideline in the world. If
Yeah,
you think, should I do this? You already answered your question.
and I think we also need to, before we make accusations or say something, we need to review what the actual thing is, because, my public comment at the planning commission meeting wasn't meant to be intimidating. I identified who I was, and I just said that I'd heard from X number of people over this and so forth. I think we need to have a process also that takes those things into some consideration.
The thing that I look at is talking about the wedge we were talking
Yeah.
about. I tried to, and I told you both, I think that was wrong. I told you flat out, and I'm done with it. That's the way we should all be. I'm not looking to have a grudge against you for the rest of my life. I think that particular decision was wrong, just like I've done things that you guys thought were wrong. And the same with Diz and Councilwoman Bean. But we need to quit dwelling on those things.
I don't think we're trying to necessarily dwell. I think we're trying to get some answers on, for me, what I can and can't do. I have not had some of the trainings that other council members have had. And I've asked for them, but this is
Oh,
the first
and
one.
I completely understand that, Your Honor. I'm just saying, with the wedge part of it, we can't, it's like national government now.
Yes,
The way, it's terrible.
totally agree with
But
you.
because Ranella and I don't agree at the federal level, doesn't mean we can't be friends. And you think about how many people in the world from the federal level all the way down to cities and townships.
Well, and-
Don't agree, but you can still be
Yeah.
friends. You don't have to have the same opinions on everything.
Absolutely. And if you look at Ronell and I, we're two opposite ends of the spectrum, but we work together well, because we put it aside. We do. And I was just talking to my fifth grade teacher today, I was having lunch with, who's also my cousin, who I asked about kind of the same question you were with the civics and stuff like that. You are right. And I think that we need to have better history lessons, otherwise we are doomed to repeat it. Sorry. I think all of us needed to get some questions answered.
Yeah, I think you guys have helped a lot.
Yes. Yeah. Because it gets things out there for us, and it allows us to process things.
Yeah, I think it's important that, once the council's made a decision, whether you're for or against it, you're part of that team.
Yes.
You gotta kind of go along with it. I see so many times out there where, people go out of the communities and those people are wrong, and it really is. There's a lot of communities in the UP out there that I work with that are really in significant turmoil.
Yeah.
Because they can't work as a team, and there's high manager turnovers, and nothing ever seems to get moving forward with the master plan and stuff, because they're digging into weeds and stuff like this, so.
And I think each council member has to feel like they are being heard. I know I felt that sometimes I'm not being heard, or at least not given a chance to explain myself. And that's something that I have to be better at saying, hey, stop right here. That's not, But you did raise one other question, and I should have said it first. Talking about, oh boy. This was a good one because it was really a neutral question too. Darn it. Anyone have any other questions for them while I think about it? How I try to base my votes on how this community feels about an issue, or how people have come to me about it. There are some issues where I get 60 people that I'll run into over an issue, just by being at a couple public events in the same month, or getting texts, calls, emails, coffee hours, what have you. Where do you think drawing the line there is? If you're getting 5 people, yeah, you can't listen to just 5 people, but if you're getting an overwhelming response, is it not in our interest to listen to the community, to maybe slow it down and give people more of an opportunity to express themselves?
Sure. If you're seeing a majority of people, but, you
I was at a 60-0. I hadn't heard one in favor on something, so yeah.
right, but how many residents in Ishpeming? So you still have a
Yes.
small sample size.
Yes, it is,
When you
yes.
think about it. The thing is, we're a representative democracy, a representative
Yes.
republic. So you still have to vote regardless of if you see 60 to
Agreed.
nothing. You still have to, you might have information that the 60 don't have.
Agreed.
But
it's
it
up
might
to
give you
us to
pause,
explain it,
might
yes.
cause you pause,
Thank
and you share that. So,
I think in voting on a lot of stuff, you have to understand that you got an overall goal, like with your master plan of where you're trying to head, and you've got different things that are gonna happen to go that route. And you may have to make a tough decision sometimes to look at something where, there's some people in this community that are very vocal that are opposed to it. But it's part of we've approved this master plan, we're supposed to be going in this direction. And we got a couple major things in the UP that we're working on, is that, the population is dipping. Just about every community is losing population. If you go back to 1960 and see where you are, that's hurting in revenue sharing. You've got inflation right now at 7 to 10% the last couple of years, and your taxable value is only going up. The inflation factor is 5%. So now you're trying to figure out, all right, if you start drawing the line out there another 10 years, I've got communities in the UP right now that in the 10 years I've been working for them, they have 20% less employees. you know, and the managers are doing twice the work that they ever had to do.
Yeah, I
You know, and
understand
everybody's
that
just,
too,
you know,
yes.
you're laying people off in the office, and there's more and more and more regulations every year. I mean,
Yeah.
you know that, everybody knows that. I mean, how you keep up with this stuff is unbelievable, but you gotta kind of look and say, you know, we need to be financial responsible, and people don't like change. I mean, a lot of people don't like change, you know, but you gotta kind of look and see what direction the world is taking us. And, you know, if we're gonna keep up and we're gonna try to attract young professionals to our community or young people to our community, you know, the things that they want are a lot different than what I wanted.
And where
You
would
know.
that you lead me to another question.
Yeah.
Where does that leave council, say, relations if there's areas where we can help in certain ways or maybe lighten the loads and allow people to have a better home life balance or what have you is you know, what are some possible ways we can do that? Is a 4-day work week with, you know, is that a better thing to serve the public when you're open later or something like that? Or I don't know. I'm kind of at a loss where that line gets drawn in the sand where you step over and you're interfering, like trying to help the manager out on something or something like that. I guess that's.
Well, retaining employees is huge, you know, especially I've got more city clerks and more treasurers turnover in the UP than you would believe. I mean, those positions are just,
Yeah.
it's like a revolving door. And, you know, finding a city manager even nowadays, I mean, I was just talking to Ray earlier. I think I've got 40% of my communities in UP in the last 10 years that have had more than 3 managers. Some of them have had 5.
Yeah.
And all the managers that have come on board since I started this, there's only a few that have had prior manager experience. You know, I mean, I can go to the big cities, the small cities, everything. They've come from other backgrounds just because there's not that desire to have this position anymore because it's so much crap that you got to take nowadays. So it's you got to try to work together as a team and you know, try to work through some of these things, but it's difficult. Planning is big. I mean, I'm a big planner. I mean, we had downtown plans, we had waterfront plans, you know, we updated our ordinances, we updated our charter, you know, and when plans came out and people had all kinds of public hearings and that, well then, when we went to get grants and went to do stuff, it wasn't a big surprise a lot of times, you know, so I had very few times that anybody opposed the projects. Because I just tell them, I said, listen, this is the plan that we did, and we worked a long time on this plan. And my job is to carry out that plan.
And I think we need to do a better job of planning in certain areas as a council, being maybe more specific on direction to what committees work on, maybe reevaluate, will it work with our master plan or not?
Well, you talk about the staff, you know, one of the sayings I had when we started to have to draw back, and it was basically under attrition, so it was not hiring somebody back in like a DPW or something.
Yeah.
And one of the things I used to say was, we're gonna contract to our lowest or our highest level of lowest level of efficiency. And what that did was it cut down to what is our core business. And what we found was we were doing many things that didn't need to be done. Doesn't matter how well you do the things that don't need to be done. And so by lowering that staff number by attrition, by budget, because budget handles everything or dictates everything, that we had to let some things go. And I think from a council standpoint, from a manager to council, is that you support you know, that attrition, contraction maybe, you got to meet the budget. If new regulations, which then we found new regulations coming in, we needed the staff to handle the regulations, and it ultimately comes to a budget question. And so then, how do you support the staff? You support it through the budget. So one of the areas that I always was mindful on is I would tell my staff, I'm going to push you to your highest level of comfort, but I'm not going to let you go farther. And I found that especially good staff members were like sponges. They would never tell you that they had too much. And that's where I think you were going, where you said, you know, they're They're stressed out.
I
They're
don't
stressed out.
like seeing, having to see our staff here on weekends when they're on salary and what have you. I as a council member want to be able to give them the best work-life balance possible. So those are the kind of things that I would like to, I don't know, is a 4-day work week like other countries are doing? Is that an option for us? Is that something other communities have went to? I don't know. I'm just.
But our job is not a punch a clock job.
Right.
Our job is
managers,
24/7.
Yes.
You know, we're 24/7.
Yes.
So, you know, that's part of it. So salary, you know, we have to be somewhat, in our minds at least, flexible that, you
But
know,
it's
there
not
might
just the
be.
manager I see here, yeah, it's a lot of staff.
Right, but still managing those salary type positions that were under me, I tried to be as flexible as possible with them so that, you know, if we had to work in the evening, which we had to, especially during budget time, if we had something come up on the weekend, we had to. I mean, we're performance driven. So sometimes you're just flexible and say, you know what, this is slow. Go to the baseball game. I don't know, you know, well, however that works. So that's such an individual thing. But what can you do? You support that. You support that effort.
I would absolutely support that, yep.
Yeah.
I think you gotta be a little bit careful here is that you gotta listen to your manager, because the manager is talking to the employees, and he's trying to make the best life and try to get things
Right,
done and the
I
whole work.
understand.
You gotta be a little bit careful as a council to turn around and say, you know, we're gonna go to a 40 week work.
It's
week. You know,
just
I
an
think you just
idea,
have to
yeah.
kind of, again, you have to work with some of these things, you know, are in the manager's boat, and you gotta work with them as a council and say, are there some ways that we can enhance the employees and help them out, what's their feedback and stuff like that, instead of trying to come up with a policy and see what I'm doing. So
And that
I'm
was just
throwing
an
that out there.
example of
Right,
it, yeah, that's what came to my mind. Yeah, okay. Anybody else have any other? Okay, well, I would thank you.
Thank you both very much.
I have some of my questions have been answered, or at least put me in a better direction or frame of mind towards things, so,
Right.
My contact information's on the last slide.
excellent.
So if you have
Have you
anything,
got cards by any chance?
I do, but my contact information is on the Michigan Municipal League website.
Yeah,
And I do have some cards that are,
that would be
I don't think-
excellent, and you're open to having questions from us?
yeah, absolutely,
Okay,
yeah.
thank
I
you.
will tell you that I'm hoping to retire though by the end of the year. We'll see.
Which year?
Yeah, I was gonna
That's
say
what
next
everybody
year
keeps
here,
telling me,
yeah.
but yeah, it's, yeah, I think I only have one card left too.
I'm the only one that asked for one, so
Oh.
you hit me, you're
I won't,
100%.
yeah, I'd like one too.
Thank you, sir.
I do, yes, thank you very much, Scott.
I know how to get hold of you.
I mean, I do know how I can probably get a hold of you too, I can just,
Sure.
ask my aunt
Yeah,
out
no,
there.
I've enjoyed the 10 years that I've been working with the league. I've got some other things I kind of want to move on to, but it's been, I guess I really got trained in the city government. There's a lot of neat things that can happen if you work together as a team.
Yeah,
You know,
there
you can make
is.
some pretty neat things happen. There's a lot of opportunity out there, and if you try to keep it, everybody stays civil, and you try to have a little bit of fun doing it, and I always try to do whenever
That would
we
be
did a
nice.
grant project or something like this, and I had any of my public works guys work on that project, when we had the grand opening, those guys were there. I have a lot of communities that get into these city council meetings, or bitching about the police, or bitching about the public works and stuff like that. Boy, that derails the train pretty quick,
Does.
so just my comments, and
thank you for giving me an opportunity.
Thank you
very
both, yeah. Okay, moving on to our our last item on the agenda, which is discussion about purchase of used playground equipment. Craig, I will let you go on that one.
Yeah, I'll give you the background of what happened this weekend, and then we'll talk about the budget and let you guys make some decisions. But I went down to Marionette this weekend, spoke with the owner, and had a good discussion. We dug around the foundation of some of the posts to see how they were mounted and make sure we understood what the work was entailed. I was lucky enough to find one of the tags that was still on there as a sticker that came off, and I took pictures of that and some other things. The equipment is in very good shape.
Good.
It is definitely worth the 35,000. It's probably well worth the close to 100 and something thousand. You know, the playground over at Lake Bancroft Pavilion is at 140, and they're still coming back to do some additional paving work and some other things that are coming in this year. But there's more play equipment at this site than there is at the current Lake Bancroft. There's two main play areas. There's a little balance beam. There's a little tiny, it looks like a turtle shell, but it's a little rock climbing studs to climb up on there.
I
There's
think
some
I saw those.
bongos, there's some pole that looks like it's a basketball. You throw your ball up in there, it lands, and comes out a different hole each time, but there's a bunch of different things that are there. All of them are sunk in concrete, which makes the removal much more difficult. I was able to reach out to the manufacturer website. The website takes you to their local rep for install. I talked to the local rep for install, and they said that it is possible to take those poles out of the ground, at best to pull the whole thing and then try to jackhammer the concrete off and reuse the pole. But there are options to bury a new sleeve that pole slides into, and then mounts that pole if one were to break or if something were to happen to one. And then I also talked to our insurance company to say, okay, can we reuse it? Is there any kind of a issue with this? And if we had to put a sleeve in the ground and bolt it on, is there any loss to the insurance from that perspective? And so we can do the work. It takes some work. We can insure the equipment when it gets placed. That's another figure that is not on the paperwork at the moment. But they said definitely do not use volunteers.
By we, you mean our DPW, right?
Well, in principle, I mean, we could get it done.
Yeah.
The recommendation on the math will be our public works, but I'll talk to that after. But it's feasible, is what I mean by we. We looked at ideas, so our public works and I talked, and we looked at whether or not we hire a company to go down with a lowboy, whether we, hire a consultant from the company to help us identify it. Everything led back to it was much easier to do with our own staff. Our staff came up with some random numbers of ideas of what it would be before I talked to the consultant for the company. When I talked to the consultant for the company, their numbers actually matched ours without throwing numbers out that they said same numbers we had in our head. So that says that we can do it. It will take, the hardest part right up front is somebody going down there and labeling stuff correctly so that we have the correct, every pole is marked in its place, and then everything that connects to that pole is marked in its place and is properly marked, and the tags don't come off and the markings don't come off. Permanent marker, blue tape strapped around, like all the different things that could be done. That's going to be a little time consuming. And then dismantling, it's two types of bolt. There's a T45, a T25, and a star bolt, which is, I forget what size it is, but it's a large Allen wrench, basically, but star bolt. I'm not sure we have a bunch of those, so we put on our cost. There'll be some having some of those available so that we can have multiple drills going at the same time once they're marked. So all in all, you gave me the direction to find out if the equipment was worthwhile. It is. I say that with very strong confidence that is good condition equipment. You asked me to see if it could be done within $10,000. Our numbers did not come in within $10,000, but it's not widely over. But those are estimates based on what we think the time is. It's probably pretty good because the consultant gave us the same general timeline. And then we would take down some of our own equipment. But one of the things that we would do is we would rent a piece of equipment that would help lift the poles and the concrete attached to those poles out of the ground when they're dismantled. So what you see before you is what we did for our rough math is on a table. And that table talks to 6 personnel over 3 days. The staff didn't want to go down there and do an 8-hour day and be stuck in a hotel in a strange town. They said they'd rather work through a 12-hour day or even a 15-hour day, depending on how that day was going, just to be more efficient and get back home. And so you see some overtime rate in there, but that was why. And then we had some pickups, an air compressor with a jackhammer, which is to try to bust that concrete off, a dump truck with a trailer to be able to haul some of that equipment back. There's some fuel costs thrown in there. They found a reasonably priced hotel. Their idea is 6 people sharing 3 rooms. So cut the cost down for that. The rental of a Mini X, and then the miscellaneous items are just kind of what we threw on paper, like the tape and the tie downs and the drill bits and things that we might need to mark it and properly strap it. And then we threw in the per diem for the travel, which is normally paid. And so all of those things came to $11,692 and 86 cents. The cents, I didn't round it. I wanted to show you just the mathematical calculations, but I mean, you're at about $12,000, $2,000 over what you initially gave me as a target,
and we can get
which
a
I think is
very-
reasonable. And it aligned with what the recommendation was. I'm going to
Very
take
nice
that.
playground for under $50,000 in the general scheme of things here.
Yeah, and so I'm going to turn this over to Grant to talk to you about what the budget can or cannot support related to that, so you can make the decision as to whether or not you want us to do that. I will say the owner is waiting with bated breath for tomorrow to know whether or not we are or not, but it is ours if we choose tonight to pick it up. It would be ours, and we would cut the check for it, so.
Grant, what have you for us?
Okay. So I printed out a copy of our capital improvements that were proposed for 2024. Really, this is going to be about you guys deciding on a direction, whether this equipment is worth cutting or scaling back a project, which would pretty solely be at the council decision level, right?
So my suggestion, it would be to go ahead with the handicap ramp replacement and make sure that that's all taken care of. But I feel like our parking lot could wait until next year. We will be having a lot of work done in the next year still with paving and whatnot in the city. And I think that would be an okay thing to cut. I know it's in rough shape, but so are a lot of other roads and alleys in the community. So that would be my suggestion, would be to scale back the parking lot and alley and do the minimum right now for the handicap ramp. Do the handicap ramp project and then scale back paving and what we can.
Okay.
That would be
I
my
don't know if-
suggestion.
And I'm just the finance guy, right? So I don't know if, Craig, there was an operational reason for the parking lot. Or I don't know if we need to speak to that to just make sure we have all of our Ts crossed and our Is dotted.
Yeah, so I mean, the idea is that the ramp is not repairable, not
Understood.
sustainable. Pulling the ramp out in its entirety and putting in a small lift with some stairs would make it an enclosed structure at the door.
Yeah.
And that the ramp would be able to offer the handicap accessible parking. The alleyway is in bad shape along that route. You'd be doing pavement matching to bad pavement, so that was included. The parking lot itself was a formerly old structure torn down and is probably
sinking,
not
yes.
compacted correctly. Who knows what else is going on, but it's been sinking. I don't know that I disagree with your statement in any way, shape, or form, but it's always easier to do things when you're here to just make that whole effort. And these are estimates based on an engineer looking at things and kind of paving it out in we call them rough order magnitude estimates, hoping that we can get within that in today's pricing. And the economy is never today's pricing. It's today, tomorrow, and the next day. You got to see which way the needle's turning. But I mean, to Grant's point, there was a reason put those two together. It's efficiency, right? But it's also, where's the necessity? If you want to choose playground over that and then look at the parking lot paving as an additional year out or see what's left over and see how much might be able to get done. certainly one of those things to consider.
Pat, I have a question for you here. Now, would you be, I mean, agreeable, you and Diz, if maybe we looked into what we had originally talked about, some crowdfunding and everything? What I was kind of milling over here was letting them, I had talked to a couple people from the Elks and the Lions, and they had, and this is personal, they had expressed interest in possibly making donations, okay, to the tune of maybe $5,000 for each service organization. And also with crowdfunding, that the city would purchase this equipment, transport it here. I obviously, there's going to be decisions where it's going to go, where it's going to be best suited and everything. But under the grounds that with the crowdfunding and the service organizations, that they would raise
Some or all.
some or all of that money, and they would basically purchase that equipment then from the city or reimburse the city for that. That way, it's kind of a win-win, because we're at the point where we can't afford this, but we can't really afford to not, because we've already been told our playground equipment does need to be updated.
And I look at this.
We're talking about putting
Yes.
more housing in Wabash, and I really think this is going to be valuable down the road for our families that we're hoping to bring into the Wabash and into our playgrounds.
One thing to me that we're not addressing with this is the basketball court. So I think if we move forward with this, with the plan we have in front of us, crowdfunding,
Could include the
organizational
basketball.
money could go toward the basketball.
Sure, and, you know, we can probably open it up. I mean, if we committed this to a certain park, you know, we might be able to crowdfund through the neighborhood and through organizations and so forth. If we don't designate it going to a certain place, we can crowdfund maybe for this from the city, but
Well, Craig also said there is, when I talked to him briefly, we also have, there's a plan here where he stated we have to make clear, is this a new park? Is this an existing park?
Right.
Are we going to clear that out and call it a new park? We're talking, you know, apples and oranges here.
Up to date.
And
So,
also, until we determine where this
Right.
equipment is going to go, I don't know how we can ask somebody to crowd.
I agree. Well,
Right,
I kind
right.
of understand that too,
And
but,
it sounds like we're getting quite a bit of equipment here, who's to say that it all has to go to one?
one part.
right,
Right.
right.
It might
It's,
need to be
it's.
broken up to different
Yeah.
spots on our list here.
I guess do we want to take a chance and spend money, which really, I mean, we're at a point now where we need a lot of things fixed. And this is not a very opportune time for this to come up, but
It's hard to.
I just think,
One of the things we just discussed with our consultants is a line front.
right,
And for my own personal, I think that in this city, all of the, I was gonna say noise,
Yeah.
bad choice, all of the support that we've heard, all the requests, all the asks is 9th Street.
Yeah,
So that to me tells me that we wanna respect these people,
yes,
first of all.
Yep.
This makes another good point that we're probably gonna have more equipment than we can fit.
Yep.
So that'll help somebody else.
yes,
So we're getting a double dip.
yeah,
The other thing is if we do the crowdfunding, we might be able to do a new basketball court as well.
yes.
there
not the
and
tennis
wherever
court,
we
at
put
least.
the other
And
equipment.
at the same time, we're looking at developers that wanna throw 2 or 3 houses there.
Yes,
And they're gonna be nice houses, they're not low income.
Yep,
They're nice houses that are gonna be families
yep,
raising children.
yep.
So I think the whole thing is a great idea, but then we have to cut for a minute
Or
and go
push
back to
to
the
next
funding.
year. Yes.
And I think, and I'm not talking for anybody but myself, I think it's a good idea. I think we should move with it, but let's cut to the funding.
Yep.
And I'd like to hear more from the manager about the remark of a lift instead of that 8 tons of concrete that's falling apart on us. Is that something that we, within
Yeah.
reality?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I want to just focus the one statement first is, while I love the idea of the crowdfunding, right? I can't do it without pinning some places and locations, which doesn't have to be made this decision tonight, but for the sake of housekeeping and making sure our budget is proper, we need to say,
Yes.
you know, here's where we're gonna put it. If the crowdfunding comes along, great, we put money back in the coffers in the place where we pulled it from, and everything washes itself in a positive manner. But for tonight, we need to decide what we want to do in order to get the equipment for the sake of housekeeping and budget. To answer your question about the sidebar on the lift, is that was what was estimated under this project. We had the engineer look at that and give us some ideas. When we get to the RFP and what it looks like on the street and what comes back for bids, we'll know whether or not it's reasonable or feasible. But that was, that
That's what the
200,000 was earmarked in that
Oh,
direction.
I see, okay,
yes.
I see.
And then the
That-
additional 100,000 covered paving, which included the handicap accessible parking, that alleyway and the parking lot was
Yeah,
that
you know,
100,000. So
honestly,
you might
Craig's-
say 50,000. I don't know what that
Well,
number would come out to be,
That would
so.
be my suggestion, to use 50,000 of the replace the parking
Yeah.
lot and alley behind. And,
And Craig's explanation of the reason to do this lift, to me, seems very logical, that it makes it more compact, adds a parking space. It's enclosed, so there isn't winter eating away at it. So I do support his idea of this handicap ramp replacement to an indoor
yeah,
lift.
I didn't even think that that was the money we were looking at.
Yeah,
At a
but
requirement.
but
We
I-
have to
the-
have that.
the parking
So
lot,
we're
yeah,
looking
we
at
can
the
cut down on
parking
that.
lot and the alley.
Yeah.
And would that $50,000 that we left in the coffer cover the paving of the actual
Alley
lift
area,
area?
the lift.
And again, I mean, it's a guess,
yeah.
it's a hard guess,
Right.
right? We're gonna have to face that decision when RFP goes out and the bids come
Right.
back in and we look at whether or not. But for the
So I
sake
guess
of
what
your
we're
answer, I
looking-
think that would be a wise decision to
Right.
think that it could. I mean, you're looking at 50,000,
So-
maybe crowdfunding comes back in play.
Are we looking at taking a chance of putting that out and jeopardizing that,
Parking lot.
that,
But
the
again,
paving of the parking lift, or?
I think the lift area could probably be paved for $50,000. And the parking lot could wait. We do have a lot of work going on in the city next year, so there will be paving companies.
And our
Working
your
here in
parking
the
lot is
city.
probably one of the better parking lots in the
I
city.
think for this evening, Your Honor, our decision
Yep. Seems to
is
be,
the handicap ramp being the source for the funding,
or just the parking lot.
a yay or nay. Well, then you could go ahead with the parking lot and the alley accordingly
And then do the part ramp
in
the next
preparation
year,
for the,
or-
yes. And we're not gonna be taking but a portion of the ramp lift
Right.
funding. So at some level, we'd be able to continue with that, or at least experience.
Or find-
So are you
figure out
talking
where
about
it is.
taking the 50 from the ramp or from the replace the parking and alley?
The ramp.
Right.
I'm
I
thinking
mean,
parking,
honestly,
but
I think you just need to say you want to pull it from the capital improvement, earmark an item,
Okay.
and then try to get that money back in the rolls when we go to crowdfunding.
what's your?
I would
what's-
say the alley, parking lot alley is better than the ramp, because I think the ramp is gonna be up against the wall at 200,000.
Yes.
By
don't
taking
wanna put that
50,
in
we might have
jeopardy
250 towards the ramp and lift.
Well, didn't we
And we're
say that,
state
didn't we
mandated
say
for
that
that, aren't we?
the ramp lift thing was such a good idea until the alley and that's done?
Well, we
Yeah,
have,
so I guess to just kind of give you an idea of what it is, the ramp itself has to be completely removed.
Right.
What you end up with is, call it a square in front of the door that is high enough to carry a lift load to the door
Right.
with a shelter around it.
yeah,
Right? I mean, so the construction of the shelter, the mechanics of the lift, and a flight of stairs so that somebody can walk up and down an emergency and get somebody down if the lift doesn't work. That's what you're looking at. It's an enclosed structure, as, squared around a door, 2-story, story and a half.
Understood.
And
And I have no
that
problem with
is,
that
I
whatsoever.
think it's a good
the
idea.
pavement that comes in is where the ramp gets pulled was earmarked as the potential handicap spaces. If you didn't do that, you still have handicap spaces, they can come around the building and get to that lift, and that could stay even in a gravel state, or just that area paved over to match in some
That's what,
way.
yeah.
That at least you have managed the hole or in the ground that was left
Yep.
when you tore the ramp out, so.
That would be my
Tiz,
suggestion.
what
I
do you
have no
think?
problem with that.
Everybody,
Yeah.
okay. Wants to make the motion?
I'm trying to figure out how I have to say it.
So I'll make a motion to purchase the equipment, the playground equipment, using our own labor, or to not exceed $50,000, and cut the parking lot and alley funding to do
I think
it.
we should go with Craig's suggestion and just take it from the capital.
Yeah, but he said don't we have to earmark something, didn't he say?
So we have if I may.
Yes,
We have our
absolutely.
project list, right? And we
Yeah.
have our actual hard budget. So we're just trying to make sure that we're gonna take it out of public improvement either
Yes.
way, right?
Yes.
But we're just making sure directionally that our
comes from
capital
the
project plan still makes
Yes.
sense and is
You-
tied to
you
some
know
sort
our
of
thoughts.
reality.
You
Yep.
don't have to
That's,
directly.
right, that's why I
Yeah,
said
so
parking lot
I'm just
and
gonna,
paving.
for my own record keeping, I'll just pretend like it came out of the parking lot for now for this list.
That's-
And then
and that's
moving
my
forward,
record,
if we
yeah.
need to flex between the ramp and the parking, Craig and me will obviously keep
And
you
that's
guys
that is my motion to do it from that.
And you did say not to exceed 50,000, so that gives us a
50,000,
little bit of
yes.
slush on the budget, in case, we need to work on it.
There's something gonna go wrong.
The motion and transport, yep,
Exceed the 50,000.
yes.
You're
Reducing,
you're reducing the parking lot and alley funding.
yes.
We're pulling the funds
For
from
it,
the
yes.
capital improvement fund. That's the
Yeah, that's
motion.
all.
We got the other direction that's kind of back behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Pat supported the motion. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Craig, thank you for your work on this. Council,
You did
thank
an
you
excellent job. I really appreciate it.
for this work on this one. This was
Look at
good.
us working together.
Very
Yeah. All right, that is one playground out of 15 that we have just,
Maybe 1.5.
maybe 1.5 or 2, yeah.
I might have an answer for that on the next council meeting.
Excellent, that's.
Not the next special.
Music to my ear. We have a motion to adjourn, we have support, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned, everybody.